Okay, so we're back on the Pocher build. Again, this is a commission build, and not that that matters, but anyway, so I wanted to start next on the ignition loom and the igniter wires and the new spark plug wires. And again, all of those parts were from Model MotorCars. And somehow I managed to not get any video of gluing that part on. That's the loom piece from Model MotorCars. But what I did was I looked at photos of the real car to get the positioning. Basically, the mounting tab there is between the second and third spark plug, and I put it up as high as I could, but without hitting the bottom of the part right there. So again, there's a little bit of gap here, but more importantly, it's just positioned between the second and third spark plug. And so once I found a position, I just laid masking tape on so that when I would glue it on, I would have it back in the correct position. And as far as actually gluing it on, I suppose you could use CA. I've had issues before where if I would try to glue something on with CA, that the CA would like grab and hold as soon as it touched and didn't give me a chance to correct it. And so then it was like crooked. And I didn't want to take that chance, so I decided to use epoxy. That way I could get it in the perfect position and then just let it set. All right, so I did do a little bit of prep work on that before epoxying it on. All right, so it doesn't want to focus on that shiny chrome, but the loom did come with holes already in it. There is, see if I can get it, there's a hole here and there, and another one here, and they're just kind of spaced down along the loom, and some more up front here and here. And you'll notice this groove I cut in. I'll talk about that here in a minute. But anyways, this whole thing is only 2.4 millimeters thick. So those holes only go in like about halfway. And if your math is as good as mine, you'll know that's about 1.2. So those holes only went in like a tiny bit. Now some of them went a little bit further. Some of them looked like they were a lot deeper in. The two holes on each end here and here, those were probably about 2 millimeters in. So really close to poking out the side. But the ones in the middle, they were just barely indents. And what I'm assuming you're supposed to do, what I'm going to do anyways, is I'm going to cut a piece of the wire. I'm going to fill the hole with thin CA, and I'm going to stick the wire in it, and I'm just going to let it set there till the CA cures, and then I can bend the wire up and put it to the spark plug. But some of the holes in the middle, like the one here, they were just barely in. They weren't very deep. And to me, that doesn't give me a lot of purchase on the wire for gluing. You know, I would like at least 2 millimeters of purchase on that wire for the glue, because that's 2 millimeters there. Because if you only have, say, 1 millimeter like that in the glue, that's not really a lot, in my opinion, to hold it. And I would be afraid of it falling out or pulling out easily. So before I epoxied this on here, which I just used JB Weld, by the way, I'll get back to the epoxy process here in a second. I wanted to drill the other holes through, which I was very nervous about because, as I said, the whole thing is only 2.5 millimeters deep. So using little drill bits, using little dental burrs, like this, I used a Dremel tool, and as best as I could, you know, I kind of marked and measured on the bit, put a mark on it, and I drilled in until I was starting to get nervous about it popping out the top side, then I would quit. And got to do 8 of them, and any one of them, if it popped out the top, that piece would be trash. And I really didn't want to have to buy a new one. So I was really careful, really took my time, making sure the holes were deep enough for the glue to hold the wire. And also, I said, there's a groove I cut in a groove or a channel right in here. I did that because when you run the wires from the distributor to here, they didn't leave any provisions for those wires. And I looked at photos of the kit, of how they say to do this on the kit, and on those photos, and here's the cap, here's the distributor cap that goes over it, like that. I don't think they actually put the wires in there. I think they just said, well, that cap will cover up any evidence that the wires are missing. And they just did it like that. That'll get painted, by the way. Looking at pictures of the real car, that's kind of a shade of a brownish orange or a darkish orange, so I'll mix up a shade, I'll mix up a color for that and paint that later. But I'm kind of thinking they just put that on and don't even worry about the wires underneath. So what I did was I cut a channel in here that's long enough for 8 of those wires to go in and glue into that channel. And that's just to give a place for the wires to go, because I do want to, even though there's a cap on it, even though there's a distributor cap on it, I do want to run the wires from here up under there, which, looking at this, I think is going to be a major pain in the butt. That's going to be very difficult and tedious. So I'm still trying to decide exactly how I want to do that. It's definitely not going to be easy, but I don't know. That might be one of the things where I just have to figure out as I'm doing it. But, so I got to figure that out. I got to paint this. Again, running these wires from here up to the spark plug will be easy. Again, just glue it in a hole, let it dry, and then run it up. I already showed in a previous video how to put the spark plug boot on. And that's not glued on, that's just kind of sitting on there loose. I could pop that off. And yeah, this is still loose, that way I can rotate it around, put it back in place. Once it's all done, I'll put a little dot of CA in there just to keep that from moving. A few other things I've done. I painted and grimed up the oil pan, and also I did this pulley. That pulley, I made a new one on the lathe out of aluminum, and mainly because the first Pocher one of these I did, that pulley was all crooked and loose. It didn't turn true. I didn't know if this one would turn true or not, but the edges are dinged up where it came off the sprue. So I could either spend a lot of time fixing this up, truing it up, and then painting it a metal color, or just turn it down on the lathe out of aluminum. And I think that came out pretty well. Didn't really take much time, a few minutes, and that'll press onto the shaft there once I get this cover on. And I also did the transmission. I painted the transmission aluminum with a few parts I just did in like a steel color, and then I just did a wash of black. I think that's acrylic black wash, and then wiped it all off, and now it looks like a nice grimy transmission. Something I'm not that good at, and I think I mentioned this before, I'm not really that good at weathering. So typically when I do cars, I try to make it look like they've been used and driven, but yet the owner takes pride in it and he cleans it up on occasion. That's kind of what I'm going for. None of that top part will be seen once it's all installed. You really only see the bottom part when you flip the model upside down. But you'll notice the pedals, and the other pedal is right here. So that pedal attaches here, and there's a compression spring, so you can push the pedal and you get that compression spring action there. And speaking of pedals, as I started to say, Notice that pedal, notice how nice that pedal looks. That is a metal pedal from Scale Motorcars. There is an original plastic one. The plastic one's a bit thicker, beefier, and wider. So the metal ones, they look really nice. Of course, that one's going to go on like that after the engine is all together. Right now, everything's a little bit floppy. But all of this will get assembled with the engine. But you can see those pedals there. They're still not perfectly lined up. I'm kind of waiting to get all this attached to the engine to do the final tweaking on those bars to get the pedals to line up properly. And also mounted in the chassis with the floor pan in, because the floor pan has cutouts to go through those bars there. So I want to put that in, and then I can do the final tweaking on the position of those pedals. But again, those are metal pedals from Model MotorCars. If you decide to get those pedals, one thing I will precaution you about is they thread on that little piece right there. I'm assuming that's a brass tube soldered to a brass plate, and it's all been chrome plated. I don't know if the chrome plating kind of fouled up the threads or what the deal was, but I had a difficult time threading them onto the threaded rod. So I had to clean up the threads a little bit with a little scribe tool, I guess, to try to deburr the threads. And I put a small chamfer on the first couple of threads of the threaded rod here, and I finally got it to thread in. And I only got it maybe 2 to 3 threads at the most, but I got it fairly finger tight, you know, at least 2 threads in. I didn't want to crank it down too tight because I didn't want to strip the threads out. And once I got it tight, I then put this stuff on. This is a penetrating thread lock. It's actually meant to go on after you put the hardware together because it uses capillary action to soak into the threads. So after I threaded it on, I put a drop of that on there just to keep them from unthreading. So if you do get these metal pedals, just be aware that the threads are going to fight you just a little bit. But they do look nice. Oh, and I almost forgot. When I epoxied that on, one thing I did, on the back side of the loom, I cut a channel to give the epoxy somewhere to go, and on the plastic part here, I cut another channel there. If you just put epoxy on 2 flat surfaces and push them together, well, all that epoxy is going to ooze out, make a big mess, and you don't have very much surface area gripping it together. So again, if you can just imagine it like, just in case it didn't make sense, let's say there's the surface of the engine, and then here's the loom right there. Again, if I just epoxied them together like that, all the glue would just ooze out to the side. So again, I cut a channel, something like that, and then something like that. So now all the epoxy is right in there and a little bit in here, right? So that way I got very minimal ooze out, but I got a lot of surface area bonding those 2 parts together. So at a very minimum, sand the back side of that. If you don't want to carve the channels in it and you just want to use CA or whatever, at a very minimum, sand the bottom of that because it is very smooth, shiny, chrome plated, and glue and epoxy doesn't usually like to stick to really smooth, glossy, shiny surfaces. You got to get it some tooth to bite into. So anyways, just wanted to explain that real quick. So anyways, yeah, get back to you in a second. All right, here's where I am so far. This one right here goes to the 3rd spark plug. I just went ahead and put that in the rail first while I had that kind of folded down. That way it wouldn't be in my way when I went to put it in later. So I've got 8 wires coming up that are then plugging into here, and they tuck up into that groove that I cut earlier, and that was kind of a pain. But the way I did that, just to kind of show you how I did it, I cut 8 pieces. I cut 8 pieces of that wire, about 1 inch long, a little over 1 inch maybe, and I glued together 4. So I lined them up. I lined them up like that, and I just put a little bit of glue on the ends, and we're talking maybe 1 millimeter. And I did that again, and then I stacked the 2 groups of 4 on top of each other so that they overlapped just a little bit like that. So looking at a side view, you'd have one group of 4 like that, and then the other group of 4 like that. So again, about 1 millimeter here. And the reason why I did that, if you remember, on the bottom of the rail, I cut in a groove, or a channel, for those wires to go into, but that's only thick enough for like one set of wires. So those groups, then I would take that, kind of flip it upside down, they would set in here like this. And then they just get bent up and then around to the distributor. So hopefully that makes sense. I didn't record that because it was kind of tedious and I didn't really know if it was even going to work, but it seems to be working. Let me see if I can zoom into here, show you a little bit better. So I have two wires. I have two wires plugged in now. And so there you can kind of see how I have two groups of 4. Hope you can see that maybe. I don't know. My camera's not that good. But I'm just bending them around one at a time. Got a loose one there that'll have to go in there. And there's that one. I went ahead and put that into the hole for the third spark wire, or third spark plug. And it works. Again, it's a little bit frustrating, a little bit tedious, just using tweezers and little needle nose pliers to try to bend those and get them into the hole. Of course, I'm trying to do this and look at the camera at the same time, so that's not working out very well. And then once I get it into the hole, yeah, I'm not even going to try to do this on camera, because it takes a really long time just to get one, and let alone trying to do it while looking through the camera lens. Actually, almost do it. I think you get the idea. That was almost in. Once it's kind of in the hole, then I'll put a little bit of CA on it and then shove it in further. So I'll get it like halfway in the hole, put some CA on it and shove it in further. And yeah, it's a little bit of a gluey mess. But once, don't forget, that cover is going to go over. So out of focus, that cover is going to go over and kind of hide all of that. Which you might be thinking, why am I even bothering pushing it into the hole? If there's going to be a cap on it, that won't come off, and you'll never see the wires going into the holes of the distributor. Why am I putting all the wires into the holes? Well, again, maybe a better question to ask would be, why did they put pistons inside of this that you can't even see at all? At least once the cap's on, and if you get a look in here, you'll see that there are wires going from the distributor to the rail. Same thing here, you'll be able to see the wires from the distributor to the rail. And, you know, chances are, if you just left all of those out and just put the cap on, nobody would ever notice. But it's like, I don't know, it just seems wrong to not put them in. But that's just me. You can do what you want on yours, and that would be fine, I'm sure. One other thing I want to mention, on the rail, it comes with those little attaching brackets with holes in them. Now the holes were a little bit misshapen, kind of ovaled, so I just ran a drill bit through it, and I already forgot what size drill bit. Is that, I think it was this one. Oh, sorry, getting out of view there. Was it that one? That looks bigger than that hole. Anyways, I think it was a 1 millimeter drill bit. I'll measure it here in just a second. But I drilled it out to fit. Now this is something that kind of bugged me about this. Okay, so first of all, so I'm not sponsored by Model MotorCars. They do have some great products, but since I'm not sponsored, I can say what I think. This is a nice looking piece, but it came with the brackets with holes in them for bolts, but it did not include any bolts. And it would have been nice if they just would have had some fake bolt heads, just kind of part of it maybe. Trying to get it back in focus. Maybe just put some fake bolt heads on it as part of the, I don't know if it's a casting or what it is. Would have been nice. Also, it would have been nice if there would have been provisions for the distributor wiring, so I wouldn't have had to have milled my own in there. That would have been nice. But other than that, it is a nice looking part. But anyway, so I drilled those holes out. Like I said, it did not come with bolts. I just happened to have some bolts. And those bolts, there we go, trying to get in focus here. So I just happen to have 4 of those bolts, and I know it's kind of hard to tell. I'm zoomed in like 335 times, so it's kind of hard to tell the exact size. So just for a reference, here's a human hair for a reference. But anyways, those, let me just get one, and we'll mic it. Yeah, sorry. Let me put that away where I won't lose it. And let me mic this one, and we'll see what the diameter of the threads are. Just the shank, 0.76 millimeters. 0.76 millimeters for the shank. So that drill bit, if I remember right, that drill bit is 0.8. No, 0.76. So the drill bit's 0.76. And so the holes that were there, again, were a little bit misshapen, so I rounded them up with this. What I will need to do before I get too carried away with putting wires in here is drill through into the engine, and then I am not going to thread those bolts in. I'm just going to stick them in with a little bit of CA or epoxy or something. Also, those bolt heads are brass, so I'll probably liquid tin them, or I'll just do my little chrome pen or something like that, just so they're not brass looking. But unless your eyes are is better than mine, which they probably are, you can't even really tell. I mean, it's so small. Just looking at it with the naked eye, I don't think anybody would notice there's no bolt head in it. But I'm going to put them in because I have them, and I can. At least I hope I can. We'll find out in a little bit. So, yeah, so I'm going to continue to plug those wires in. I still need to paint the cover and get the bolts and the other wires, and also for the coil here, I'll need to get a wire wrapped around in there for that, and then we'll come back and take a look at it. Oh, one other thing. I attached this the way photos of the real car kind of looked. If I would have done this the way the kit showed, this would have been flipped around like 180, which, again, according to photos of the real car, I don't think is quite right. Also, what I did was I shortened it a little bit. This area right here, this area right in there, I shortened that piece on this part. I shortened it so this whole thing would set down maybe 2 millimeters lower, just because this seemed to be too high from photos that I've seen. But anyway, like I said, let me get those wires done, and we'll come back and take a look at it after that. Alright, so I've been doing a lot of work on the engine. As you can see, I got all of the spark plug wires on. There's a few popping loose. I really didn't want to use CA to glue those on. I just wanted them to press them on and stay, but those 3, they keep popping off for some reason. So I'll just put a little dot of CA in each one of those, put them on, because that would be annoying for the customer to have them keep popping off. And you can see the distributor cap and the wires running down right under here. And then we have the one that goes to the coil here. So now, one thing I would like to say about the wires, they do look a lot nicer. Like I said, once those are on, they'll look even better. They do look a lot nicer than the stock kit wires, and they do give you plenty. You end up with like a whole, you get like 3 of these are about 12 inches long, so you get like 36 inches worth. There's probably at least 12 inches left, so there's plenty of wire, but they are a little bit, in my opinion, they are a little bit too stiff, because when you bend it, it wants to spring back a little bit. I mean, you can put a bend in and it'll stay, but you'll notice it just slowly kind of springs back. So you really have to hold a tight bend that you want. But the fact that it keeps springing back makes it a little bit more difficult to position them exactly where you want them here. That's why those 3 or 4 keep popping off, because they keep wanting to spring back away. So they're a little bit too hard and too stiff. And I don't know. Again, they look nice. They definitely look a lot better than the kit ones. But it would be nicer if they were a little bit softer and easier to manipulate. And also, the striping is only on one side. So when you install them on here, you got to make sure that the striping is visible. Otherwise, it just looks like a yellow wire. But I tried to make sure that you see all the striping on all of the other wires there. And I also painted the cover. I'll get back to that in a second. And while I was waiting for that paint to dry, I went ahead and added all of the extra stuff onto the engine. Now, all of the plumbing and stuff, I'm going to do that after this is mounted to the chassis. I think it'll just be easier because the chassis will then kind of hold this still for me while I do all the plumbing. I also installed everything on this side. Obviously, these are way long and need to be trimmed. But I got everything installed over here on this side. I will also put the air cleaner filter box thing, whatever that's called. I'll put that on after it's in the chassis. And I also installed the fan and my new pulley I turned down on the lathe. Now the belt, the kit belt, was actually this one. The kit belt is too small, and if you were to stretch this, if you were to stretch that and put it over the pulleys, it would put a lot of force on those pulleys. It would just want to squeeze everything together, and it would just put way too much stress on the engine. I don't know if it's the age of the rubber that just kind of made it dry out and get stiffer. But several years ago, I went on eBay, and I found you can get a pack of these belts. They're meant for, like, you know, DVD players, VCRs, or like tape players or whatever. So you can get a pack of these for relatively cheap. They come in all different sizes. And this size right here, this is the size that I went with. It stretches across those two pulleys fairly perfectly, but without putting too much stress on them. There's a little bit of give, a little bit of play, but I think that looks good. And it's not trying to squeeze those together. Now, one thing I also noticed is that in the kit, the gears and the shafts have just a little bit too much extra play. And so when you turn, I'm just going to turn the back here. When you turn that, if you're not careful with the play in the shafts, you can actually feel it kind of skip a tooth. But I really don't think that somebody's going to be putting the crank in and cranking it just to watch the fan spin. There's really no way to fix that slop in here now at this point. I would have to completely remove all of this, which it's bonded in pretty well. So I would risk severely damaging this just to fix a function that's probably never going to be used. So I'm going to leave that as is. It does work, just not very well. Oh, there it's going. There it's going. But anyways, so we just got to be careful turning that. Also, before I forget, the gear that goes in here, there is a gear that goes right in there. That gear is thicker, well, because it has like a shoulder on it. And actually, can we see that here? Yeah, that gear right there on the instructions, that gear right there. The picture on the instructions does not show a shoulder, but there's actually a shoulder on the end there, and that makes that gear thicker than the space allowed in here. So I had to cut off about 2 millimeters off of that shoulder so that this would come in tight. Otherwise, there is a big gap right in here. And so again, I had to shave that gear down, or the shoulder down, so that it would fit, and then squeeze that gap together. And so that looks a lot better that way now as well. So at this point, I'm ready to put that cover on. So the cover, when I look at photos, it's kind of an orangey color, a brownish orange. So I started off with a burnt sienna, and but the burnt sienna just looked a little bit too brown. So I mixed in some yellow and orange, but that looked too orangey. So then I put in some flat black, and that gave me a color that I liked. So that's a mix of burnt sienna, red, yellow, and black. I would have put orange in, but I don't have orange. That's why I did red and yellow. And also on the back side, so that it would clear all the wires, I used a little one of these little ball end router bit things in my Dremel tool, and I had to go in here and really grind out and remove a lot of plastic in here to make room for the wires. As you can see, I also drilled the holes for the bolts that will go through. So this will get glued on. This will get glued on right like that. And then the bolts will go in, and then that part will be done. And after that, the engine, I'm not going to do any more work on the engine until it's in the chassis. So I'm going to put the cover on, and I will probably also, I will also attach it to that piece right there, and I will attach the transmission to that, and then this assembly will be ready to go in the chassis. Actually, just thinking about it, I might put this in the chassis first. That might be easier. Put that, well, I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But before I can put the engine in the chassis, before I can actually put the engine in the chassis, I need to finish the chassis, which is going to be installing all the stuff on the bottom, like the exhaust and all of the drivetrain, the rear axle, front suspension, and all of that. So the engine is pretty much going to be on hold for a while until I get the bottom of the chassis done. Then I can flip the chassis over, put the engine in it. So let me get back to you when I got that installed. That way we can see at that point, and that'll probably be it for this video. And so yeah, let me get that done. I'll get back to you in a second. Okay, so there it is. I did see the ones that kept popping off. If the others pop off, I'll put those on, but those seem to be staying okay. You'll also notice that these two are kind of splayed out because there is this piece that goes in here, and I just realized that that rod is in the way. Maybe it goes on that side of it. All right, so here's the deal. That rod was missing in the kit. The instructions show a rod connecting from here up to a bracket right there, but it was missing in the kit, cannot find it. So I just made one, but it is in the way. So I'm not sure. I'll have to figure that out. And they don't show, you know, I'm just looking at the instructions now, just out of camera view. It does look like that rod goes on the outside of this. So that needs to go in between and then go in like that. Yeah, that looks, I don't know. I got to figure that out. But I'm not going to waste your time while I figure that out. I might address that later. Anyways, those two are splayed out a little bit because that is going to sit kind of in between them a little bit. So I'll have to readdress that. But as far as the primary point of this video is concerned, all of the igniter wires were done. So again, the main point of this video is just in case any of you are thinking about buying the ignition wire loom cover kit stuff from Model MotorCars. Now you can see how it's installed, you can see how it looks, and the issues I had, and hopefully that helps you make a decision on if you want to do that on yours. Personally, I think it was time well spent. I think they look nice. It is definitely a lot more time consuming than just running the kit wires from here to each plug. But again, I think it's well worth the effort. I think it looks good. I'm proud of it. I'm happy with it. My only concern is I'm not sure if I got the firing order just right. But the engine is going to be on hold for now. I'm going to go to the chassis, and we'll see you on the next video. So until then, as always, thanks for watching.